I'm actually going to do a very cheeky thing. I'm going to take all of the clips in which we discuss Cuphead and adjacent to that Netflix. I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to call it an episode of Dramatis Sermo.
Makes sense to me.
Cheeky boy.
When I look out my window, many sights to see. When I look in my window, so many different people to be, that it's strange, so strange. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. Must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch. Oh, must be the season of the witch.
Anyway, let's talk about the Cuphead Show, which was recently released at the beginning of February, and I guess it's fair to say that I liked it very much. As an animation scholar and former academic, and also as generally a fan of that specific 1930s, late 1920s to early 1930s animation style and aesthetics, better known as rubber hose. As a fan of all that, Cuphead, the Cuphead Show, is everything. Capital E, everything. It is bigger than life itself. This unrestrained, unapologetic cavalcade of references, tributes, homages, and visual cues to an entire decade worth of animation history. And to me, like I said, that is absolutely everything.
Yes, I liked it as well as an animation appreciator and someone who enjoys basically going through the history of animation myself.
Yes, you could write an entire essay worth of material just for all the many little references that are scattered and cluttered all over this experience. It is, at its very best, a pure rubber hose fever dream when the line between comedy and nightmare fuel becomes deliciously blurry. When modern structuring and narrative say bye-bye to you, and you are submerged into that pure, unfiltered madness that pretty much exemplified that more anarchist style of animation of the time, before the Hays Code, or the implementation thereof in 1934, forced a lot of the industry to calm down, as it were, and adopt a more structured, more moralistic approach to storytelling, or any storytelling at all. The Hays Code did far more damage, far more bad than good, but that's a whole podcast for another day. Regardless, the recent video game phenomenon of Cuphead, now transliterated rather smoothly into an animated experience with its style and aesthetic and specific references and cues, as we mentioned, it's very good to see happening. I never cared for Cuphead as a video game because I knew I wouldn't be good at it and not enjoy it at all. I've seen you play it.
Yeah, I did show it off to you, and I really loved the game myself, just because it's a kind of gameplay I can get into. The charm of it relaxes me strangely.
Strangely is right.
And the whole idea of playing a game that is a love letter to the era of that style of animation of rubber hose, I can really sink my teeth into it, is what I'm saying.
Now, the reason why it's called rubber hose, it refers to how characters tend to be designed with a very flexible line art and general bounciness that makes them much easier to draw and animate in general, although the way the Cuphead Show is produced is a lot more complex than it actually looks, especially when you see how much in terms of details is put into this show. And really, the devil is in the detail this time. The pun very much intended. I do love the film grain that permeates throughout the entire series, giving us the illusion of a slightly worn out 16mm film reel in a way that's not intrusive.
You could literally see the love and homage to a lot of the 1930s era of animation.
Yes.
You know, right in the character designs as well as when every episode opens up with the Mugman flying a biplane around the literal giant cup head of Cuphead.
A reference to the Universal Woody Woodpecker cartoons.
And other design choices like some of the sentient characters that are say that telephone that basically
Yes.
The living telephone is from the Mickey Mouse cartoon Through the Mirror.
I was thinking of that one exactly, the one in which Mickey Mouse fights a bunch of living cards. That was supposed to be at the time a reference to Alice Through the Mirror, the unappreciated sequel to Alice in Wonderland, which was sort of smooshed together in the Disney adaptation from the 1950s with Alice in Wonderland.
I have two others in my mind's eye to mention, other homages.
I have my list as well, all specifically from one episode.
I will mention two of them at least, just because I feel like it will give an idea, essentially, how much love and appreciation for the era is in here. The three-headed dragon boss, which reappears in this series, is a homage/reference to the same dragon that Popeye would fight in one of his animated shorts.
Yes.
Popeye meets Sinbad the Sailor.
Yes.
And in my opinion, there's a third one, which is not mentioned on the trivia, with the ghosts in one episode.
Okay, okay, I'm going to stop you there because I have a lot to say about that particular episode. It is my favorite in the series, and I have all of your references here in my brain. Because of course I do. We'll get to that. Let me just reel us back in a little bit, because I still want to talk about the details and attention thereof that went into the production of this show. Because they could have just made a black and white cartoon and I would have been so happy about it. But really, the Cuphead Show wants to encompass all of the 1930s in terms of the predominant and more popular art styles of that period. Not just the very specific Fleischer Studio style of rubber hose animation that defines pretty much 100% of the characters on screen. That very specific beanie mouth, that very specific bounciness and energy, the big eyes, and a smidge of Disney here and there, too. Anything and everything is referenced, from the aforementioned Fleischer Studios to Disney to Universal's Walter Lantz and everything in between. Both the early 1930s and the late 1930s, which by the end of them would look radically different from where the decade started. And you can see all of that in the way the backgrounds are drawn, presented, and the way the show is colored. The color palette is slightly muted, slightly worn, which emulates the palette that was prominent in the earlier colored cartoons. Also, you have your occasional quote-unquote live-action backgrounds. They are clearly made in 3D, but they emulate the miniature models and the occasional live-action props that would be utilized in a lot of Fleischer cartoons. For example, if you recall a classic cartoon titled The Cobweb Hotel, the one with the evil spider and the two freshly married flies, and I believe it's from 1936, but I could be wrong, a live-action background was indeed utilized to frame the animated portion of that cartoon. And there are plenty of such backgrounds in the show. Most of the times, an episode will be opened by a lovingly rendered quote-unquote live-action version of the Cuphead's boy's house.
Which would kind of look like a miniature, essentially.
That's what I said, yes.
Other times, they tend to go with pre-painted backgrounds, which kind of looks similar to those animations of the time as well.
They look very good, too.
Yeah, so... Honestly, the first time when I saw the miniatures or 3D effect I was thinking this is unusual marriage of the two. But,
yes, well, that was actually far more typical in Fleischer cartoons, especially in the late 1930s. That's a specific reference to such shorts as The Cobweb Hotel, which I would encourage you to hunt down and watch again, because it's a very good short with an evil singing spider. And there would be such live-action backgrounds also in many of the Popeye color specials. Much more expensive and expensively made cartoons starring Popeye that were colored and would be about 15 minutes in length, such as the aforementioned Popeye the Sailor versus Sinbad the Sailor, but also Popeye the Sailor versus Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, I think
it might have been I think I say 40 Thieves because usually that's what it follows by.
And naturally the best adaptation of Aladdin, Popeye the Sailor as Aladdin.
Makes sense
to name a few. There is a lot of history here in display, and for an animation historian and appreciator such as ourselves, it is so much fun to just dive right into this and be overwhelmed by so many tributes and references. In fact, I dare say that the single best episode in the series, Ghosts Ain't Real, and now we're talking about that one.
Yep.
Is both literally and figuratively a parade of references.
It certainly is. I especially like that episode as well. It also has a very catchy song in there to me. It's actually the best song of the series.
On the whole, it is the most Fleischer-y episode you could possibly have. Yes, I just coined a new word, Fleischer-y.
Fleischer, yes.
Yes, it is the most Fleischer-y episode as a whole, but the obvious Swing You Sinners reference isn't just the only reference in it. There are plenty more. The premise of it is that Catboy and Magman are taking a shortcut to go back home, passing through the graveyard at night. And there are ghosts, and the ghosts torment them, and it turns into a haunting, scary, devilish, jazzy musical number. Once again, a literal and figurative parade of references. And here are the references. The ones I've spotted, mind you, in chronological order. Of course, there's the Skeleton Dance from 1929, Disney.
That is a very obvious one.
Very
Definitely.
obvious one. There's Swing You Sinners, 1930, starring Bimbo, the dog, the one in which he gets persecuted by musical ghosts and dragged to hell. There is The Mad Doctor from 1933. You can see the spooky mention of the Doctor in the background and also the skeletons coming out of the stairs. Fun fact about The Mad Doctor, it is the only Mickey Mouse cartoon to be in the public domain.
Which is very strange.
Which is very good for all of us. Yes, well, it happens. For example, every propaganda cartoon from the 1940s is automatically public domain, even the Disney ones.
Oh yeah, because, the government technically owned them for historical purposes.
And of course there's The Lonesome Ghosts from 1937, and perhaps the second most obvious reference in this, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When Snow White gets herself lost in the evil, spooky-looking forest, you could honestly do a comparison side by side with many of the scenes in this cartoon to the originals that they are referencing. And people will absolutely do that, much like they have done that for the video game. I like, first of all, that level of dedication, and I like that many people get to relearn about the history of animation. Both the good and the bad bits that inevitably come with it. We could talk about the quote-unquote art form of blackface minstrelsy found a home in cartoons.
Oh, yeah. Eesh.
But let's not do that now. We're having
No.
fun.
Yes, we're having too much fun here.
The point is that it's irresponsible to pick and choose what to preserve from history. You have to be aware that social and socio-political institutions that govern us have originated from a place of class differentiation and racism and all the jolly old stuff. And inevitably, any form of art or any industry that's born under those social and political circumstances will reflect society itself. The time period and society itself.
It's pretty much like a time capsule, essentially.
It's not necessarily just a time capsule so much as it is a fundamental building block for both the art form and the industry as a whole. You might have noticed that that very rubber hosey, flexible style of animation has become more popular in the last decade, and I'm not just talking about specifically how Cuphead looks. I'm talking about very simplified designs for characters in cartoons with spaghetti limbs and beanie smiles.
That was actually going to be another talking point I was actually going to bring up, because it's actually quite amazing in the last fair few years, like last decade or 5 years, depending on how long it's been going on for, that the rubber hose animation is basically coming back in style, so to speak, with even musical artists basically doing animated music videos to reference the era.
I would say that the most popular aesthetic or artistic direction in Western cartoons is somewhere in between anime and rubber hose.
Yeah.
Which honestly makes too much sense, considering how Japanese animation took a lot of inspiration from Western animation that was available at the time, which means mostly rubber hose and 1940s and so on.
Yeah, because the reason I kind of bring this up is because there was a time in the 90s when Felix the Cat came back into, I would say prominence, but...
Yes, prominence is a strong word.
But prominence is a very overstated word in the fact that Twisted Tales of Felix the Cat tried to essentially bring back the rubber hose and the zany animation, in a wacky way, sort of thing.
It was a bit ahead of its time, considering what style was popular in the 90s. It was the period of the resurgence of the golden age of animation in between the 1940s and the 50s, and Felix tried to emulate the sort of messy, messed up, abrasive, chaotic, anarchist nature of very early on rubber hose cartoons, which is why if you try to watch it again today with modern eyes, it's almost unwatchable, if I have to be honest. I cannot stomach it.
It is, honestly. It was probably not the best way to bring that sort of style back, especially.
But I appreciate the ambition, and I would love to see something similar today. Wait, we have Cuphead now.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well, but it's like, it's kind of amazing. During the 90s, everyone was like thinking like, it's old and uncool now, sort of thing, because it's old and no one appreciates that.
It is.
But now it's like made a resurgence in modern times, which kind of goes to show that things can crop back up, essentially, appreciated even by young people of a generation.
I would say that going back to the Twisted Tales of Felix, first of all, it is the best use of Felix in 50 years at that point. But second of all, the idea was there, the energy was there. What was not there were the modern animation techniques that could properly recreate and emulate that style. It's ironic because only now we have the proper animation technology to convincingly re-emulate that very old, primitive style. And the Twisted Tales of Felix tried to feel like a rubber hose, but it did not quite have the savoir-faire, let's put it like that, to pull it off.
Yeah. Though I will say that I do like the opening of that series as well.
It is a very interesting opening.
It's interesting, and for some reason it gets stuck in my head, especially the part where it sounds creepy for some reason.
Yes.
But yeah, the only reason I bring this up as a good comparison of a show that was not beloved compared to Cuphead, which is quickly becoming a beloved show.
We have to preface by saying that the Cuphead Show only has 12 short episodes to its name, a first season, while Felix said 2 or 3 seasons, I believe. So it's too early to do a proper side-by-side comparison.
The initial reaction is more what I was getting at, and the relevancy and the enthusiasm that is shown by fans of such animation and such.
And it especially nails the energy with its choice of music and character presentations. For example, the introduction of Dice King in his own episode is perfection, because he comes into the stage scatting and dancing like Cab Calloway. If you know your animation history, you know that legendary jazz singer Cab Calloway was instrumental in the more popular and studied Fleischer cartoons of the early 1930s, because oftentimes he would get rotoscoped into a character in one of those shorts. He was a ghost walrus in Minnie the Moocher, titled after his own song, Minnie the Moocher, which everybody knows and references, by the way. Mostly because of the Blues Brothers, admittedly.
Yeah.
That was Cab Calloway, by the way. Heidi, 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 ho!
Heidi-ho.
Yes, and that was Minnie the Moocher, and he did that in the Minnie the Moocher cartoon, starring Betty Boop and Bimbo. That's so good. I love to say that out loud, honestly. He was also the old man on the mountain in Old Man on the Mountain. He was also singing Coco the Clown in the Betty Boop Snow White adaptation.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's more, but these are the 3 that come to mind at the moment.
Also, I would like to give props to Wayne Brady, who voices King Dice. He really nails the character and also sounds smooth, suave, and got personality to him, much like the guy himself.
Personally, I would have loved if they hired the singstress who performed the King Dice theme song in the original Cuphead video game to do her patented impression of Cab Calloway as he sings.
Oh, yeah. That would have been nice.
I cannot do it.
Mr. King Dice.
Neither of us can do it, obviously.
Neither can-
We are white boys, of course we cannot do it.
Yeah, I will preface this that basically Wayne Brady, who voices King Dice in this cartoon, is a black American comedian. If you're American, you might mainly know him from Whose Line Is It Anyway, a improv comedy show.
I think he's had quite a few roles in animation as well. This isn't his first rodeo.
I do not have his acting list up right now, so I cannot say from the top of my head. I just know him mainly from his comedy work, improv shows that he's been a part of. He can be funny at, in a good
At
amount of
intervals.
time. Yes, at intervals.
Okay, fair enough.
I say that, but anyway.
So,
But the other voice actors do great jobs as well.
of course, being an homage to an old-timey cartoon, both Magman and Cuphead have to sound like they are from Brooklyn. They have to. It's required by law. Such an important part of animation history.
I will also say that I really like the devil in this show as well, especially the voice acting.
Okay, so I think we need to talk about what doesn't quite work in this series as well. Because
Yeah, true.
for the most part, it's good, it's fun, it's everything you want it to be.
To be honest, I will
But-
say that basically it's perfect for what it is because it doesn't outstay its welcome, so to speak. So things but there are some minor problems, but nothing that takes away from the overall enjoyment of the show to me.
The show is very funny. I do believe that the Cuphead Show at its finest is the Ghosts Ain't Real episode, which does away with normal structure and becomes a uncontrollable chaos, which again it perfectly encapsulates such classic shorts as Swing You Sinners, and also Bimbo's Initiation. I forgot to say that one. Yes, Also, Bimbo's Initiation from 1931, starring Bimbo. Wanna be a member? That one.
Wanna be a member?
Yes, that one is also referenced in the Ghosts Ain't Real episode. I'm glad we circumnavigated back into the topic so that I could remember it. But anyway, that's the highest point of Cuphead. But then I think there is a bit of a free fall in terms of quality after that. There is this episode about an invisible sweater that's meant to fend off the insistent attacks by the devil himself that for some inexplicable reason is a two-parter. Even though the joke itself isn't all that clever or funny, and it's a bit protracted, if I'm being honest. I really did like how the devil was presented in the very first episode. He was a balanced breakfast between funny and threatening. As in, he was a legitimate threat to the main characters and to everybody because he's the literal freaking devil. Fire and brimstone and all that. He still gets defeated, of course, but that doesn't necessarily sacrifice his threat, especially when you have this confrontation between him and Dice King in the Dice King episode. But then the Invisible Sweater episode happens and he gets clowned a bit too hard for too long, for my taste. You have henchmen to play that role, to be clowned constantly. You have Dice King for that. I was about to say Dice Funk. No, that's a different podcast. You have a Dice King for that role, and he plays it perfectly. The devil should be a little bit more protected, much like he was in that classic Betty Boop cartoon, in which she literally gives the cold shoulder to the devil.
Ooh.
Yes, no, literally the shoulder becomes a block of ice. It's great, I love it. Aside from that, how good it is to have the devil as a villain in a children's cartoon in 2022. As the main villain in a children's cartoon as well. It reminds me of the last time that happened consistently, which was the 90s.
Yeah.
Plenty of devil appearances, but not so much between then and now, and definitely not so much between then and 80 years prior. Basically, the last time you could have the devil be a proper villain in a cartoon was before the Hays Code ruined everything, essentially. It definitely ruined the career of Betty Boop, because now she was suddenly too sensual. And cartoons are for kids, you know.
Oh yeah, totally.
Uh-huh. Right.
I actually did like the devil myself, just because he has a lot of personality, you know, and I, for some reason, do like how he kind of acts, his mannerisms are kind of embodies the era of that sort of villainy.
Not quite. Even in those old cartoons, the devil, whenever he appeared, was a lot more threatening compared to how much of a clown this devil eventually becomes.
I thought it was more something along the lines of the devil was kind of representing villains in general, like an overall package of the type of villains you would find in that time period.
Yes and no. It depends by whomever was making the cartoon, really. Well, depictions of the devil would not disappear in future cartoons, even throughout the 40s or the 50s, but they would definitely get resized and reworked around. They would not be as prominent as, say, being a main villain in a Betty Boop cartoon. But you would get occasionally the devil tormenting Yosemite Sam because he's not able to catch the rabbit.
Though mind you, before we go on, I will also say that it's kind of ballsy to basically...
oh, and who could forget the devil dog in that classic Tom and Jerry cartoon?
Oh yeah, that one. Come on, bring him down here!
Yes. One of the better depictions of heaven and hell in a children's cartoon, yeah, I have to say.
It's one of the more memorable ones for me, honestly.
Absolutely. A small aside here, when the Hays Code was fully implemented, suddenly all film and cartoons as well had to be more adherent to Christian evangelical values. You know, bad guys are punished, the good guys win at the end. Any and all portrayals of religion would be under scrutiny, especially.
Before I forget, anyway, I basically got to say about the Cuphead show that basically it's kind of ballsy that basically, you know, to end like the season 1 of animations with
a cliffhanger.
With a cliffhanger to be continued. To basically, I won't say why it is, but
I am personally disappointed by that decision. Of all the shows that did not need to have 2-part episodes or cliffhangers, Cuphead is 100% that one. The Cuphead Show works best when it's a series of not necessarily connected shorts, like classic Looney Tunes or classic Betty Boop cartoons. Self-concludent, messed up little stories, where comedy meets nightmare fuel. At its worst, it's about an invisible sweater.
I agree. I actually do agree with that, because even though I did enjoy the episodes of the 2-parters for their own reasons, sort of thing, I'd rather prefer if they, stick to what the shorts were, just to keep true to...
In fact, if I am being perfectly honest, 10 minutes is too long an episode for Cuphead. They should be about 7 minutes long. 6.5 is my last offer.
But yeah, I would definitely think that episodes should be more self-contained stories that end with a conclusion, at least.
Or a strong punchline. I'm fine if you're doing SpongeBob SquarePants but rubber hose.
Yeah.
I'm still laughing at this. Don't try to make an overarching narrative for the freaking Cuphead Show. Listen, you're doing a rubber hose cartoon series, not a Saturday morning cartoon. Although, if you were going to go that route, you could have just given it the story of the video game. So every episode is the boys trying to collect a soul for the devil, and then there's the devil as the final boss. You could have done that, but they chose instead, wisely, in my opinion, to turn this series, this property, into a more episodic fare, which works best for it.
Yes.
But at the same time, do not try to have a continuity. Please, I beg of you. I don't care for it.
But yeah, that's the overall thoughts I have on Cuphead, really. Just, it's a really lovely show, sort of thing, with things to get really bogged down into enjoying animation-wise, especially to appreciate references to other animations, and also, it's a good laugh, essentially.
I would say it's a solid 4 dancing skeletons out of 5. Right then. Topics for the day. Topics. I do have one topic I wish to bring forth to the table of topics.
And what would the topic be?
To put on top of other topics, if you will, like a fairly protracted Monty Python gag.
Yeah.
Netflix is a pile of puss.
You don't say.
You could just replace the name Netflix in the phrase is a pile of puss with any other company name, because yes, but I would like to focus primarily on Netflix for tonight's episode. There always seems to be something new with Netflix. Something more and more to hate. Netflix is not doing great financially. You could chuck that to several awful, terrible decisions that they have made in the course of the years. For example, splurging a lot of money into terrible live-action shows that they cancel after one season because they don't draw immediately the kind of retention that they want. Or maybe spending a lot of money financing the stand-up comedy routine of a notorious transphobe, which drives away a lot of people organically.
Which is funny, considering Netflix has a lot of shows that basically seem to be pro-trans, so that's very weird.
Netflix is a company, and a company would like your money. So what a company usually does... I don't mean to sound condescending here, sorry, I'm just I'm just a little bit ticked off. What a company usually does, they try to appeal to as many people and demographics as possible. Doing the Disney, if you will. Oh boy, yeah. Disney. I'm not going to talk about Disney today because I cannot spend so much time of my life saying all the many ways in which Disney sucks. But anyway, Netflix. They are in financial issues right about now. So, of course, to remedy the financial issues, they decide to make another one of their great brilliant, patented, good financial decisions and obliterate their entire animation division, which is only the division that consistently gave them and all the other streaming platforms during the pandemic years the most amount of money. There is a lot to say about this. First of all, it is such a shame that we are probably never going to see the much anticipated animated adaptation of Bone by Jeff Smith, as well as all the other series. They were already half done by this point. That's a shame. It is a shame for us who love animation. It is a shame for those who work on it. It is a shame for all the animation workers that get crunched, that get abused in this industry. It is a shame for a lot of reasons. Animation is what brought the most money to Hollywood and streaming services, literally billions of dollars in the last couple of years alone. And it is the first medium that gets the axe whenever something doesn't go right. It is the sacrificial medium. It is the medium that gets treated as if it is inferior because it's not live action. And don't get me started on the Academy Awards.
No, let's not go there.
Don't get me started on that. This whole situation with Netflix ties with a larger ongoing issue. I'm sure you already know about this, but there has been for the past many months, an ongoing fight between the Animation Guild and the rest of the industry to get a new deal for animation. Hashtag New Deal for Animation occasionally trends on Twitter. The long and short of it is that animation workers, your storyboard artists, your writers, your layout artists, your in-betweeners, you name them. They're all fighting together to get better paying jobs with better healthy conditions. Because now capitalism in general has reached that point in which existing under it, if you're below a certain economic threshold, has become unsustainable. The unionization process for animation workers is just one of the many awakening of a social conscience that's been happening across the USA. Many unions are getting formed, finally. Most notably, there is the first Amazon union, which somehow managed to exist in spite of it going against Amazon, but that's just the beginning of the fight in the grand scheme of things. The more capitalism gets greedy, the more the elite gets frisky with its abuse of the working class, the more there will be people who fight against it. And the animation industry is no exception.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Netflix, because we are on a Netflix train. Do you remember when we discussed the Cuphead Show last episode?
Yes, I did.
That show sure was fun. It was pretty much everything, almost everything we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
We talked plenty about the history and the background that informed its aesthetic. But we never really mentioned anything about the real-life background behind it.
The behind the scenes, essentially.
Well, this brings me to an interesting point. Many streaming services, Netflix is chief among them, tend to have several seasons of a given animated show pop out every few months apart from each other. Which, if you are even slightly knowledgeable about the traditional television circuit, you will find quite odd. You know that to make any given season of television, you will need at least 1 year. So to see several seasons of a given show come out multiple times a year, that doesn't seem like it makes any sense. Well, Devar, you're right. You would be right about that. It doesn't make any sense. That's because all those several different seasons of television, of animation you see on Netflix or indeed any other streaming service, they were all comprised of episodes made in one working cycle.
Oh, gosh.
Meaning, more often than not, season 1, 2, or even season 3 of something like, I don't know, She-Ra, maybe?
Yeah.
Or how about that Voltron show from a few years back? Every 2 or 3 seasons of those are actually one season, technically. So, once you think about it, that makes sense. The logistic of it would be impossible otherwise. So let's circumnavigate back to the Cuphead Show. We saw what was counted as season 1 of the Cuphead Show a few months ago, which ended on an awkward cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Netflix has announced a second season of the Cuphead Show to come out this summer. Surprise! It was the same season all along! It's not the second season, it's the second batch of episodes from the same season that animators have most likely killed themselves in order to make it. So you might be asking to yourself, why do they do this? Why do they break a season into several mini-seasons and publish them at different intervals? The answer is quite simple, really. Elementary, I dare say, dear Devar.
Yeah.
To maximize profit and to underpay the animators. Essentially, the way I understand animation contracts work is that these people get paid on a season basis. They get paid once to make one season of animation, except then that very same season gets broken up into multiple parts in multiple seasons to make more money for the bosses. They are paid for the work of one season for what is essentially multiple seasons. Hold on.
What?
Do you smell that?
What? What do I smell?
Hold on a minute. Oh, is this the package I've ordered? Why, thank you, my cabman. Here's your tip. Say hello to the wife. You'll never believe this, Devar. Let me just put back my headphones. You'll never believe this, Devar. This is the package I've ordered. It was just delivered to me. Let me just open it live on our show. I'm opening the package that I am definitely holding in my hands.
Yeah, usually are.
What's this? Ah, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Fresh new bullshit. Straight off the farm. What a delightful stench. Let me just put it on the shelf, along with all the other desiccated feces that I am now apparently collecting.
A lot of bull?
Yes, this is indeed a lot of bullpucky from the bosses, as they always exploit the workers. And the whole Cuphead debacle, it's just the peak of the iceberg. One of the salient points of the New Deal for Animation protests is the life-threatening abuse that people in the industry suffer because executive producers want to save money on how many people they hire, so storyboard artists end up doing the job of layout artists, of rough animators, in-between animators, colorists, you name it. They become overworked, they are underpaid for the kind of work they do, and finally, as a nice little strawberry on top of the cake of bull, Netflix, or indeed any other streaming service, because everybody does that, make even more money than they were already saving by hiring less people.
You can't see me, but I'm literally twisting my face.
I can hear you. Honestly, I can hear the twisting of the face, if you ask me. It is repugnant, it is repulsive, and this is why we need unions. This is why workers have to fight for their rights. And this is how we get anything from the free weekend to civil rights. by people protesting and rioting against injustices. To summarize, Netflix is a pile of puss. It is a terrible company. It's run by monkeys, evidently.
I would say that's actually an insult to actual monkeys smarter than them.
You know what? You're right. Monkeys are smarter than Elon Musk. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. But anyway, it's bad. They have lost a cartoonish amount of subscribers in a month, and they are going to lose even more. They are desperate, and it is a miracle that they have existed for this long and been successful at it. Even with the competition from Disney Plus and HBO Max and Hulu and however many other services we have right now, they were still quite successful, and it's only now that everything is coming to a head. About time.
Well,
in case I didn't make it abundantly clear, by now I am completely behind the New Deal for animation. I am behind animation workers first and foremost, specifically because I love animation, I love cartoons, I enjoy anime, I just consume the medium at large. And I cannot properly enjoy, if I may be selfish for a moment, I cannot properly enjoy this medium if I know that the people making the things I enjoy are suffering, are on the threshold of poverty, are being abused, are being used and spat out by a greedy, soulless corporate industry. I cannot enjoy the Cuphead Show if I know that Netflix is pulling such utter smelly bull. I need to throw this bullshit out of my window. It's festering the entire room.
I'm in the same boat as you on that one because I cannot enjoy the medium of animation or video games when it's made on the backs of suffering and people who have been pushed to the very breaking limit that they lose the love for the industry that they really wanted to be a part of.
There is a similar argument that was made many times about the comic book industry, as far as 30 years ago, in fact. This is just an all too familiar scenario. People that worked in video game or cartoons or films or comic books, they were all burnt out by the experience. It's almost as if capitalism is not good for you. It's almost as if we need some sort of way to regulate it, or maybe to ensure that workers' rights are respected. If only there was a solution to that.
Yeah.
If they decided to tax the rich appropriately, we could have easily solved world hunger 10 times over. And that's a pessimistic prediction, mind you. We seem to be doomed to die off because billionaires are an existential threat. But hey, at least that guy is taking us to space. Not really.
No.
I would not want to be on board that spaceship when it inevitably explodes, but I sure do hope it's going to have a lot of billionaires on it.
I think they'll be the only ones able to afford it, honestly.
Okay, well, I would love to reference the ending to Don't Look Up, but the only thing not realistic about that film is that it went too easy on the subject matter. It should have been more exaggerated, if you ask me.
Oh dear.
Right. Alrighty then. It is important that we have this notion firmly established whenever we might come back to review the second season of the Cuphead Show. As I'm sure we will.
Yeah, I'm sure we will do that.
We must implicitly preface every discussion about cartoons that we enjoy with this notion that the industry is abusive and most likely some poor storyboard artist has been immolated to make this one thing that you like. If this notion bothers you in any way whatsoever, then congratulations, you still have empathy. I am not here to tell you what you should be doing with this newfound frustration, but doing something as simple as boosting the conversation in some way or the other through your social media might just contribute, might just help.
Yeah.
It's sad when you have a show that's okay, passable, fine, getting renewed over a show that might have been legitimately great, but it came with the burden of being an original IP and it did not draw 100 million views in the first week.
Yeah.
Because that is Netflix's metric for a successful show. And I would like you to focus on how insane that is. The whole business model that Netflix has for its original programming is something out of a donkey's arse, if you ask me. This is a misguided byproduct of the early days of streaming services, when the novelty of it really caught people by surprise. Oh, you mean to tell me I can binge watch my favorite shows all at once in one place without having to buy DVDs? That seems so convenient. I'm going to watch all of Friends right now and contribute to give this show hundreds of millions of views in total. So here comes a sharply dressed Netflix executive and says, this is the future of television. Let's make a few original shows and release them in batches of episodes all at once. And if they don't get 100 million views within the first week, we can them. Also, and this is between us, don't tell anyone else. Psst.
Yeah.
Psst. We can screw so many people overpay with this strategy. If the show is unsuccessful, we don't have to pay residuals. Wink! That was the whole point of the Writers Guild strike from 2008, by the way. Streaming services in general are a bit of a scam when you think about it. The whole culture of binge watching has ruined television and has ruined the chances of so many shows to actually be greenlit. Or if they do get greenlit, they don't last more than one season because they get cancelled because they don't instantly draw Game of Thrones numbers. As I said before, and I will say again, original properties have a difficult mountain to climb. Releasing every episode all at once instead of the traditional week-by-week television scheduling that shows do enjoy on traditional cable television, being forced to deal with this system puts them at an inherent disadvantage. And it's bad enough for live-action shows that get cancelled after one season, like Cowboy Bebop, and also other shows that I have not watched but I'm told are good, and what have you. But it's a lot harder for animation, actually. If anything else, if nothing else, 2022 was one of the worst years for animation as an industry. The Warner Bros. Discovery merger with the Honey Boo Boo guy in charge killed so many projects dead and cancelled so many shows and films before they even came out, even if they were done. Going back to Netflix cancelled a lot of shows, as we said multiple times by now. Many of them were animated series. Many of them were animated series that had already multiple seasons. Except, here's the kicker, they were not multiple seasons, in fact. They were all batches of episodes from the same completed season of animation that hard-working animators had already finished making, that Netflix broke down into multiple parts and released them all in the span of 1 year.
Yeah.
So if that show ended on a cliffhanger and you happen to be invested in it after the second or third season was out, well, tough luck for you. That's exactly what happened to Dead End, Paranormal Park, and also that's a similar case study with the Cuphead Show.
Yeah.
Now, this is something we've already covered a few times, in fact, namely how Netflix screws over animators and animations with this system. They will have them make an entire season worth of television, which in this case means approximately 30 episodes of varying length between 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then they will break them down into 3 parts to come out several months between each other, but still in the span of 1 year, with inevitable diminishing returns as they stop advertising them, essentially. They send them to die. They profit from it, and they pay animators less because even though they are presented and called seasons, 3 seasons in this case, it's still technically 1 season of television that was made, and people were paid 1 season worth of living wage. We covered this already last time we discussed Netflix at length, but it is worth repeating. Netflix and all of streaming services are bad for television and are bad for animation specifically.
Yeah.
This actually smoothly segues into me talking about the Cuphead Show some more. After the first quote-unquote season, there were 2 more quote-unquote seasons, which I will not refer as seasons anymore for the reasons we have established.
Yeah.
There were 2 more batches of episodes. One was at the end of summer, the other was at the end of autumn. And this is not the first time Netflix has had a completed show in their hands and divided it into 3 parts to be distributed in the span of 1 solar cycle. They have done this practice before many times. The one example that comes to mind is Kipo in the Land of Wonder Beasts. That show was marred by several production issues. That show had full 20-odd minutes long episodes, not 10 minutes long episodes, mind you, grouped into 3 batches of episodes of 10, which means that animators were essentially tasked to make 3 seasons worth of animation, and the end result was extremely compromised because of that. You can tell just by looking at it. Prime example of how Netflix screws over animators and treats animation in general. The people making the things you love. Do I need to remind you of that time in which the BoJack Horseman studio Ternante tried to unionize? Netflix reacted by instantly cancelling Tuca and Bertie, and also cutting short BoJack Horseman itself.
No, I do not need reminding of that because I remember that.
And speaking of Tuca and Bertie has also been cancelled again because of the Warner Discovery merger. Anyway, the Cuphead Show. I have a few notes about it. This will not take long, hopefully, because both of us, we've already said most of everything we could have possibly ever wanted to say about it the first time we discussed the Cuphead Show. Beyond all the references, beyond all the colorful aesthetics and the character design and the attention to details, you still have, at the end of the day, a pretty mediocre cartoon. And yes, I have soured a little bit ever since that first season, because, that first batch season, quote-unquote.
The first batch of season 1, essentially.
Yes, the first batch of the only season that will ever be of Cuphead. Yeah. It's an okay cartoon, much like Wednesday. It's okay. It's entertaining here and there, but it is also a show mired by several structural and pacing issues. I distinctly remember saying that the most ideal version of the Cuphead Show would have been a traditional 7 minutes long short, the kind of which would be played before the feature presentation in classic cinemas of Golden Age Hollywood. That would have been the ideal shape and form of the Cuphead Show. I would already point out that 11 minutes long episodes have pacing issues in that it takes longer to get to the point of the joke, to the meat of the gag, and some of said gags and jokes drag their feet towards the finish line because the timing is slightly off, because they have to fill more minutes of episodes that they needed to.
Yeah.
that was a recurring issue with the Cuphead Show when we first observed it. It's gotten worse ever since, because now we have 15 minutes long episodes, the exact same length of the Popeye Color specials from the mid-1930s, and those two had pacing issues. So now all the potentially funny gags and interactions and jokes and slapstick are watered down significantly because the timing is off due to the sheer unnecessary length of each episode. As such, I started to lose interest. It doesn't help that every single batch ends on a cliffhanger because it's a show on Netflix. And every show on Netflix, by design, has to have a cliffhanger to hook an audience after they binged the entire show in one day, hopefully.
Yeah.
And that also is something that ruins the Cuphead Show, because, again, it is not a show that works under that particular business philosophy. It's a show that would have benefited for that famous briefing room that no one ever gets anymore, and have a once-per-week broadcast. The best part of the Cuphead Show as a whole comes in the last two episodes of it, because they are all about Miss Chalice. Miss Chalice, as it turns out, is the most interesting character. She has an actual story, an actual arc and a backstory, and a much better connection to the devil than Cuphead will ever have, and that made me wish I was watching that show instead, and that is every time, without fail, the worst criticism you can give to any given show. I say this about the Cuphead Show, and I definitely have said this about the much maligned High Guardian Spice. Because when you're watching all episodes in a day or two, because you have no reason not to do that, you start to realize that you don't really enjoy these characters. The one dominating dynamic of the entire series is Cuphead gets in trouble, Mugman is the one who worries. Troublemaker, worrywart, dynamic.
Yep.
That has been done many times before this, and this does not really add anything to the formula. And when you are presented with it constantly, it just gets boring and repetitive. So at the end of the day, the Cuphead Show, for all its qualities, is ultimately a relatively dull show. When you get to the actual substance, the very way the show plays out, outside of all the neat little references for all the nerds out there, me included, the show isn't really that much. It's fine, but actually it doesn't even matter, because, spoiler for the ending, it was all a prequel to the video game, so now go play the video game, advertisement. Had you seen Edge Runners? This is the Edge Runners for Cuphead. Just as much of a mixed bag. Yes, I don't think Edge Runners is all that good when you get past the quality animation and novelty of it. Same argument with the Cuphead Show. Right. That concludes my Cuphead Show review. So yes, that's really all I have to say about that cartoon, which isn't really all that much.
I feel like if I watched the rest of the show, I probably would still feel the same. I would think, this is a okay show. It's funny at times, tickles my funny bone every so often. But at the end of the day, it's just okay. I could just admire the artistry, the backgrounds, yada yada.
Once again, a lot of the problems that haunt this show have to do with the fact it's doomed to be a Netflix program. If this show had been picked up by the Disney Channel or Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, maybe it would have had a more consistent quality. Definitely a consistent runtime, that's for sure.